Okay, part 3 of language. Here you can see English-speaking countries, and this is showing you colonialism, all right? This is where the British colonized Anglo-America, the United States and Canada. You can see different Caribbean islands. You can see the South Africa. Basically, if there's any minerals, the British were there. You can see the different parts, India and Pakistan, Australia and New Zealand. So English is influenced a lot, mostly by that British colonization, but then you can see some areas like the Philippines by the Americans when we took it in 1898. But this is a conquest map, all right? The internet's not involved in this yet. Okay, all right.
Okay, so I get dialects and accents. We have talked about how we've divided languages from families down to branches and then groups, okay? Well, languages can be further divided into accents. Actually, dialects would be a little larger, and then accents would be a little smaller. So I'm going to tackle accents first. Accent is how a word is pronounced, or how it sounds when it's pronounced. And a lot of it has to do with social class. So there's stereotypes that go along with different types of accents. Some are positive stereotypes and some are negative stereotypes. I mean, think about the way that someone from Ireland sounds, that accent that they have. Okay, if they were to say for someone who's from Tennessee and how they might sound. Okay, so that's an accent. Dialect has to do with the way that the language varies. So, for example, Australian English, okay, versus American English, okay? And then you're gonna get down to more like sub-dialects where we're gonna talk about the Californians, okay, versus the people, who live over in maybe Tennessee, okay, or maybe, actually that's more West Virginia, I think, right there. Don't have my accent completely dialed in, but I think something like that. So a dialect is gonna be a larger division, okay? Accent, how things are pronounced, okay? So this is dialect, examples of dialect. So one thing with dialects that's different is you might have different vocabulary. So if you think of the different parts of a car, okay? So we would call this, sorry, I was looking at lorry and it says truck. So anyway, that would be the name. We call it a truck, they call it a lorry. They call it the hood, they call it a bonnet. If you're thinking of other things, an elevator is a lift in Great Britain. A diaper is a nappy, okay? So just different variations on the same thing, but different words, okay? Now here, we're getting into subdialects. So Mr. Wright was talking about, the different groups who came in. So I believe it was I always look at my notes, the Angles in the north, okay? And they sound more Scottish, okay? But they use the U, like okay, kind of sound. So when they say ground, it sounds like grund, okay? Or pound sounds like pund, okay? And it's a little harder to understand folks up here, at least from where we're from. The folks who live down here in the southeast, those were the Jutes, and the Jutes have the short A, like the bet, okay? The short E, like in bet. So apple sounds like, okay? And cat sounds like ket, all right? Ket and apple. The Saxons in the southwest, they have this strange sort of AI sound. So they say fresh sounds like freish, and egg sounds like eggs, okay? And all of this are these just different, sub-dialects, okay, in these different areas. So you hear different, vocabulary being used from area to area. Now, something that we see emerges as time goes on, and especially as media happens, is something called received pronunciation or standard pronunciation. So there's a very kind of calm in the middle sort of dialect. Here, I think it's called the Midland dialect, that no matter where you are in the country, people will sound almost the same in the way that their accents will be very similar, the dialects will be similar. Okay, that would be, they call it received pronunciation or British received pronunciation here in Great Britain.
All right, so from that last map, what's interesting is when you're in different parts of the United States, as I mentioned earlier, in New England, they're still speaking a version of those southern counties where the Puritans came from in England, and they've clung to a lot of the pronunciation, all right? And then in this mid-region, they were into business. These guys up here, you couldn't be different. You know, down here, if you were willing to work hard and make money, come on in. So there's more of a Germanic influence, and this is going to spread, and you actually get more of a variance up here because of the Swedes that are going to come in, and they're going to mix in with that Germanic. And you guys are familiar with a lot of this from the Dakotans in Lodi. You know, like I remember Ryan Bender, I'd announce a baseball game and he'd give me a soda pop, oh yeah, you betcha, and $5 cash on the barrelhead, okay, for every game I did. These guys, now this is influenced by around London, all right, these were the original migrants came from, the business people, and then down here is just outside of London, and you're going to get more of that southern drawl, all right? But what happens is even in the south it changes because as new groups are coming in. In Appalachia here, these are more of the northern counties of England, and they're actually saying that that's the closest to the original Shakespeare. Different groups are going to come in from Eastern Europe and influence things in Texas. Remember in that video when the guys from Texas talked, they didn't move their mouth at all? That's like Boomhauer on King of the Hill. He says, dangle, 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 we're going to go out and kill them fire ants. All right, so you see that. And then the West is influenced by all of this migration, and then just really our unique pop culture influencing things. Obviously, the California accent is different from what you're going to find in the Mountain West. And just for kicks and giggles, make sure you watch the Californians again, and you can sound like Mr. Hillstrom, okay? All right, I mentioned soda pop. Oh, yeah, you betcha. Up north, it's pop or soda pop. All right, we'll say soda out here, and they actually say it in the Northeast. But Coca-Cola is from Atlanta, so in the South, it's just called Coke. All right, so people will refer to a product in different ways, okay? And don't be drawing, okay? Don't be tripping about that, all right? And I get, oh, man, old people go nuts about this. The ballot. Here in the Central Valley, we see the ballot in Spanish and English. If you're over in San Francisco, you see it in English and Chinese. All right, here this one is for Miami. So you've got English, Spanish, and whoa, what is this? I don't even know. Oh, Haitian Creole down at the bottom. And that's just what we do, okay? We want everybody to vote if they are a citizen. All right, so I'm done there. Okay.
It's time to play. Is it dialect or is it a language? So dialects can be so different that they can be seen almost as their own language. I think Mr. Wright talked earlier about the Basque, okay, people in, let's see, there we are, right around Barcelona right here, okay? They have, it's descended from Vulgar Latin, okay? And when they speak it, they say that it's its own language, it's its own family, it's from its own branch, it's quite separate. And people will use this a lot of times to self-determine in their country. So if you remember, I think it was, we may have been last year, sorry, I'm way up here in France, that here in Barcelona, they were trying to split away from the rest of the country, okay? Saying essentially that we are our own ethnic group, we would like to have our own country. Well, the problem is if they do that, if they do self-determine, the rest of Spain is going to go broke because that's where a ton of money comes in. That's the capital, okay? The same type of thing can happen, you know, we talked about over here in Galicia. Okay, the Galicians have a very specific way of speaking, sort of a Portuguese, but it's almost like a Portuguese Spanish that they're speaking. And they claim that it's a separate language. Other people say that it's just a dialect. So a question you might get is, how does dialect, or how does how could that lead to self-determination? Okay, and again, it goes into culture, it goes into identity, and also if you look at some of these places, you look at Barcelona. If you look at where Galicia is, they're coastal, right? And they're making a lot of money there. Okay. What's next? Okay, so having a lot of different languages doesn't always lead to division, okay, or self-determination. So Switzerland has 4 official languages. German is probably the most spoken, but they also have people speak French. That's an official language. There's Italian, and then there's Romansh, which Mr. Wright mentioned earlier too. So part of making a language an official language is people feel heard, they feel valued, not just culturally, but also in the government. This is a very decentralized type of government, and so there are regional elections, there's regional decisions being made, and so you tend to see not as much conflict. Not to mention the fact it's a very, very wealthy place, right? So we're making decisions about how we're going to continue to make more money, okay? Rather than fighting over what little money might be there, or feeling that we're drained, right? That maybe Switzerland is taking all of the money from Lausanne over here. Okay? All right, and then this would be another example of, self-determination or attempts at self-determination. So in Quebec, we've talked about the Quebec, how do you say it?
Québécois.
Say it again?
Québécois. And that's probably
repeat. All right, so the French version, the Quebec version of French, the Québécois, or however you say it, they very, very much wanted to make French the official language of Quebec. And in the 1970s, 1980s, people were, hostile about it. They were like, you will speak French. The signs will be in French, okay? All the official business will be in French. And, it turned off a lot of people. They actually had a vote in 1995 to try to separate, and they lost the referendum. It was actually good that they didn't, because if you look at where Quebec does a lot of its business, it would be with English-speaking Americans, and that would be unfortunate for not only Quebec but the rest of Canada. All right.
Yeah. Just to go back a couple fun stories. Let's see if we go back here. One more. There's a student we had at Lodi High. I can see her face and her dad's face. He makes really good wine. But he is from Switzerland, so he speaks French, Italian, and he speaks Low German, which is common German, and High German, which is a German of officials, diplomats, and business people. I didn't even know that. And then he obviously speaks English, and that's very normal for people from there. And then here there was a question years ago about how if Quebec would have actually won and pulled themselves out of Canada, who would they do business with? Well, imagine if they could only do business with France or former French colonies. That would have been so detrimental to them. Okay, I'll get one slide here and then we'll switch to the next one. Okay, Nigeria, you guys did a question on Nigeria, and you can see that not only do they have different language families, okay, come on back, Nigeria. Come on forward, Nigeria. Different language families separating them. But then remember, the British come down here, and this becomes more Christian. This was a heavy Arab trading area. Timbuktu is up there, all right? So they are Muslim, and at one point, the capital was here, but when they became an independent country in the 1960s, they moved a forward capital. But you can see, even with all that British history and Arab history, they started out with separate language families. And I want to say that there's like 75 languages and dialects in Nigeria. It's pretty intense, all right? And I think it's time to stop this one, and we go to the next.